Computer Programming for Kids, Step 5. Analyzing the choices the user makes. So we've now got code that will cause the text of our app to change when we start it up, as well as every time the user clicks the next button. But there are some things missing. How do we assess the user? That is to say, how do we determine, actually just make an educated guess about, his age range or her age range? For that is the whole point of the app, to guess a person's age in a general way, based on the selections they make. By in a general way, what I mean is that we will guess the person's age only in a very broad way with 3 categories which are represented in the collage below. So in the newsletter, there's a collage with 3 images of people. A young girl on the left, a middle-aged man, Mark Twain in the middle, and an old lady on the right who's holding a rooster. The young girl on the left is in the whippersnapper phase of life. At the time the above photo of Mark Twain was taken, he was 9-0, neither young nor old. On the far right, the venerable old lady is well into the geezer period of life, or perhaps geezerette period of life, if you will. Which category are you in? I'm guessing the whippersnapper phase. I am in the 9-0 stage of life myself, or to be honest, I guess I have just begun the geezer phase, as that is considered to begin at 60, and I am a smidgen beyond that. In this step, we will add the code needed to make an educated guess about the age of the user. There are actually a few things we need to set up to get this done, namely, 1. Add a variable to capture the score. 2. Prevent the user from moving on from the current question until they have made a selection. 3. Add code to calculate the final score. 4. Add a label or something to display the result to the user. We will take care of the first thing listed above in this step of our journey. To do so, we add a variable to keep track of what the user has selected. In the same area where we added the sequence variable, add another variable of the same data type, int, named age score. So that part of the code now looks like this. The new code is bolded, and then a snippet of code is shown in the newsletter. Now we will assign a value to this new variable at the appropriate place when the user selects the next button, and the value of the choice the user made, which radio button they selected, can be recorded. First, though, we need to decide how we are going to do this. What numerical value should we give for choices made? For our purposes, we will say that a score of 1 means the user chose the selection most geared toward the youngest age range. A score of 3 will mean that the user selected the choice that is expected older people would select, and a 2 is given for the in-between answers. We then average the scores at the end and see whether the user's average score is closest to 1, and we will guess they are a whippersnapper, or closest to 3, and we will guess they are geezers, or closer to 2, in which case we will view them as being 9-0, neither young nor old. To prepare for doing this, we need to change the group box and radio button code a little bit. We will assign each radio button control the appropriate value as to whether that choice is whippersnapper-ish, geezer-esque, or 9-0-like. We do that by assigning the corresponding number we just talked about, 1 for whippersnappers, 2 for 9-0s, and 3 for geezers, to the radio button's tag property. The tag property, which many controls have, is a handy place to store cryptic or semi-cryptic information concerning the control. By cryptic, I mean it's something you are concealing from the users. Not because you're trying to trick them, but because it is a programming detail that they don't need to know about. In our case, we will use the radio button's tag property to indicate whether an answer is more likely to be one selected by whippersnappers Ninos, or geezers. Note, a control is a visible component on a form, or a web page for that matter, that can be interacted with. Some examples of controls are buttons, radio buttons, text boxes, check boxes, and combo boxes. We will learn about various controls as we go along. To be specific about what we're going to change, let's remind ourselves of what the existing code looks like. And then the code for sequence being 1 is displayed in the newsletter. And this is what it needs to be changed to, new code bolded, which shows in the newsletter the same code but with code added, where radio button 1 is assigned, its tag property is assigned a value of 2, radio button 2's tag property is assigned a value of 1, and radio button 3's tag property is assigned a value of 3. Note, I mean no disrespect to the Rogers who are not among the 3 here, Ebert, Federer, and Maris. I easily could have added Roger Williams, Roger Ramjet, or, most egregious omission of all, Roger Miller, one of the greatest songwriters that ever lived, and doubtless other Rogers too. So, based on this code, it is expected that young people will choose Federer, old people will choose Maris, and folks who are kind of in between will choose Ebert. That is because we are using 1 to represent whippersnappers, 3 to represent geezers, and 2 to represent ninos. But hold on, while this will work, you'll see how later, it's really not a great idea to use magic numbers like 1, 2, and 3 to mean something that has no direct connection with those numerical values. When using magic numbers like this, it's easy to get confused and ask yourself, now, wait a minute, which value does 1 correspond to? Is it the youngest or the oldest? The solution to this is to use constants. Constants are the opposite of variables, in a sense. As we learned, a variable's value can change or vary, V-A-R-Y. On the other hand, the value you assign a constant remains the same all the time. It retains its initial value. It is constant. So, we will assign names to constants that will stand in for or represent those numbers, 1, 2, and 3. To do that, go to the top of the page of code where you added the 2 variables earlier, sequence and age score, and add this code. And then some code is displayed which shows these constants being declared and given values. And names, of course. Whippersnapper is assigned to 1, Nino is assigned to 2, and geezer is assigned to 3. As do variables, constants have data types. Here too, as with the variables, we are using ints, or integers. The difference is the const, C-O-N-S-T, that precedes the data type of int, indicating that these values are set once and for all. They're constants. Now, change the code below, which runs when the value of the variable sequence is 1, to this. And the new code is bolded, and it shows how the tag values are changed from specific explicit integers of 1, 2, and 3 to the names of these constants that we just added, Nino, Whippersnapper, and Geezer. As you can see, where it used to say tag equals 1, it now says tag equals Whippersnapper. Where it used to say tag equals 2, now it says tag equals Nino. And where it used to say tag equals 3, it now says tag equals Geezer. The values are still stored as the integer values, though, 1, 2, or 3. The names are just there to make it more understandable to humans when they read the code. Whippersnapper represents or stands in for the number 1, etc. It's now easier to read the code without getting confused about what the numbers assigned to the tag properties mean, right? The explanation or reminder is built right into the code by using those human-friendly constant names, which provide descriptive names to represent the values. To add this sort of code to the whole shebang, copy and paste the code below, replacing the load next batch block of code with the following. So then it shows a bunch of code where all those previous literal numbers are exchanged for the names of the constants that represent those numbers, but which make it easier to understand what's going on. In the next step, we will add code to prevent the user from moving on until he has made a selection of one of the radio buttons.